Welcome, strangers, to Talkumentary, a show where we watch documentaries and then get together and talk about it. What's going on, everyone? My name's Jeff, and this is Talkumentary. Today I'm here with my friends Katie.
What's up, y'all?
Molly. Hi, Molly.
Hi.
And King James himself.
Yo.
And as always, we're joined by friend and producer, Mr. DJ. What's up, DJ?
Hey, guys.
This week, we watched a 100-minute documentary called 13th.
1 out of 4 human beings with their hands on bars, shackled, in the world are locked up here in the land of the free.
The 13th Amendment to the Constitution makes it unconstitutional for someone to be held as a slave. There are exceptions, including criminals.
It was a hell of a way to start our little expedition into documentary watching and talking. This was a 2016 film that explores the, quote, intersection of race, justice, and mass incarceration in the United States. This doc is named after the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which was for the abolishment of slavery and put an end to the involuntary servitude, with one huge caveat, which we all kind of learned about when we watched this documentary. That caveat was except as a punishment for the conviction of a crime. Did anyone else get as, I guess...
I was surprised by the caveat,
surprise
honestly.
is a good thing. James, is that surprising to you when you heard that?
I was surprised because when I first heard it, I was like, free the slaves. I'm like, all for that. Like, all right, they free the slaves. And then it went on and it's like, wait, but you can become a slave again if you commit a crime.
Right.
I'm like, wow, well, hold on, wait. It's kind of defeating the purpose, you know?
Yep. And I think a lot of what this documentary was about was how do we exploit this little loophole in this amendment and continue to exploit people. Anyway, 13th received a lot of acclaim, including an Academy Award nomination for Best Documentary. It won 3 Primetime Emmys for Outstanding Documentary on a nonfiction special. Another Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Writing for Nonfiction Programming, and Outstanding Original Music and Lyrics for the song Letter to the Free by Common, Robert Glasper, and Kareem Riggins, along with a whole bunch of other nominations for various awards. I didn't realize until I started researching things like this how many different types of awards and award ceremonies and things. You always hear about the Academy Awards, but there are hundreds of different award ceremonies, and 13th won or was nominated for a whole bunch of them. Yeah. This documentary is certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes with 97% and an audience score of 90%. One of the crazy things that I read when I was looking up things about this doc was that, okay, so this documentary came out in 2016. In June of 2020, what was happening?
George Floyd.
The
world was shutting down.
In my hometown of Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Yeah. During the George Floyd protests, the doc exploded its viewership with a 4,665% increase in viewership, which I thought was insane. You win Academy Awards, which means people are watching it, and then it goes up another 4,665%. That's kind of insane. So I think it's fair to say a lot of people had a lot of good things to say about this doc.
And it's good that it's like so accessible too on Netflix and stuff, especially because the world was shutting down in that moment. So we were all at home, we were all stuck indoors, and then all of the protests and everything broke out and the world was on fire basically. And so then we were given this knowledge, and so this, like, it doesn't surprise me that an Academy Award winning film got so much attention after.
That's a good point. I'm angry. I'm at home and I'm angry what's going on.
Right.
Fuel my anger with another angering documentary.
And we were looking for ways to be informed about it so that when we were watching the news, we weren't as scared. We wanted to know what was going on.
Yep. It was directed by Anna DuVernay, written by Anna DuVernay and Spencer Averick, produced by Howard Barish, Anna DuVernay, and Spencer Averick. It was a Can Do Films production and distributed by Netflix, which is where we watched it. You guys will get to know me as Jeff the Name Butcher because I'm sure I destroyed those names. But we will have links to the documentary and all of those names in our show notes to give credit where credit is due. A quick warning before we get into the episode. If you haven't seen the documentary yet, go check it out before you listen to this episode. This is going to be your one and only spoiler alert. So go watch it, come back and join us. But before we get too far into it, let's talk about why we chose this documentary. This week, so if you're new to our show, which everybody in the world is, we have every week somebody that we assign as our dealer. The dealer will choose the documentary that we watch, and then they get the opportunity to talk about why they chose it. This week, Katie picked our doc. Hi, Katie.
What's up, Jeff?
It's always good to hang out with you.
Jeff's the best.
Why'd you choose 13th?
So when George Floyd happened, we were all stranded at home. And I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. So my friends were in the middle of that happening. Obviously, it wasn't happening to them, but it was happening around them. It was like watching my home burn down. And this documentary is obviously a little older than that. But what I didn't realize is the connection between the 13th Amendment and prison. So the 13th Amendment obviously ended slavery, except for that clause where you could force people to work. And I think what we don't realize is that we are still using that. J.C. Penney used it. Victoria's Secret used it. Furniture companies are forcing prisoners as slave labor to this day. And sometimes they get paid pennies on the dollar. But not only that, this is something that was created to rebuild the South and exploited since they lost the Civil War. So I picked it because I knew that this is still a very relevant, very necessary topic. And when I realized the connection and the loophole within the 13th Amendment, I thought this would be a very exciting and very important topic for us to do.
Mm-hmm. So you were saying, had you seen it before we did
No,
this?
I watched the previews and I definitely seen clips on things like John Oliver or Amber Ruffin. So I knew a little bit about what it was going to be about. I definitely wasn't prepared for the very graphic images that they show in the beginning, Emmett Till and other people that were hanged in the South, but it's very necessary. And it was, well, it's hard to watch. Absolutely very necessary.
Mm-hmm. James, had you seen this before we chose it for this episode?
No, I've never seen it at all. Like I said, I thought it was like Free the Slaves. I'm like, okay, Then I got into it, And I was like, hold on, wait just a minute. This is, you learn that it's like a redesign. That was my word that stood out to me in this redesign. They took slavery and redesigned slavery to make it legal, basically. The South may lost the war, but they still won.
Still getting away with shit.
Yeah, they still this day,
Right.
Just throw this guy in there for, he stole 2 pieces of bubble gum. He got 15 years, stuff like that.
And now he can do slave labor.
Yeah, chain gangs and stuff like that.
Molly, had you seen this?
No, I hadn't seen it. James actually watched it like a week before I did, and his excitement coming to tell me about it made me it almost made me nervous to watch it just because I cry easily, and and I knew it was going to be a sad and intense and an absolute necessary thing to watch, but I hadn't seen anything about it before, and just off of the name, I thought it was going to be history of slavery, that kind of thing, and so I was very surprised about what it actually was about, but it was good that it was about that too, because it kind of connected the past with the present. Yeah.
Were you guys excited? Was this something you were excited to get into, or did you feel like this was like, oh God, this is almost, I know that for me, and I'll answer that first, I think this was kind of a yes and no answer. Was I excited to watch this? Well, this is one of those, topics and those documentaries that you kind of go into it knowing that you're not going to feel great when you watch this. There's probably a lot of shit that goes on in today's world that's gone in the past when our parents were kids or our grandparents were kids, and even before then, that we're just not, me as a middle class white male, probably never had any kind of experience with. I knew it wasn't going to be a feel good doc. So no, I don't think I was excited to watch this, but interested, willing to watch. Yeah, absolutely. You know,
I think a good way to describe it is that we all know that bad things have happened and we all know that we are responsible for it. But to be able to go in and have it described for us is an experience that is not only necessary, but should be required. There's no way for us to know all of it unless someone were to put it all together in a nice handy dandy documentary. And so I may not be excited to hear about all the awful things that people have been through, but it's imperative for me to understand how we got here. And white ancestors have put Black people through this. They were dragged from the shores of Africa, put into slavery, and then created the prison system. It's necessary to understand how we got here based on our history so that we can all understand institutionalized racism, the prison systems, etc.
So one of the things on Talkumentary that we kind of ask is that before you watch the documentary, especially if you haven't seen it before, you kind of write down some predictions, some preconceptions. Did anyone have any predictions and beforehand that you maybe took note of? Was there anything you were expecting going into it? And I guess for me, I felt kind of what my note said was that I feel like this documentary is going to be fucked up. I know that it's going to not feel good, but I also, my hope, I guess, by watching it was that, and by talking about it here with you guys, was that I'd be able to recognize my own privilege and the things that I just haven't been exposed to, some of at my own fault, but also because it's the society that we're in right now. And kind of the second thing, it's going to highlight some of those systems that are in our current society. And those were my predictions. And maybe not as fair, systems that are maybe not as fair as I have been led to believe, or if you're taking things at surface level and not scratching any deeper, that things are just a little bit more dark than I believe. Anything else anyone wants to add before we get into details and whatnot?
I didn't have any predictions. I came in, I watched it once. I'm like, oh my God, look at these people that's going crazy. Then I turn around, I better watch it again to get a different feeling. So that's when I watched it again, and how it started off in one point, and then it went from free the slaves to enslave the slaves to civil rights to prison, to incarceration on large scales. You know, and I like, wow, this is going through the whole thing. And it was like very interesting. You know, I don't blame people for today, what happened from yesterday. And like I was telling my friends here, I said, the thing I worry about now is, hey, I got enough money that I had to go on bankruptcy or something like that. And that's a good thing because we ain't got to worry about all this extra, even though it's slightly happening today still, but there's a lot less people in that today.
All right, so this is kind of the point of the show where we get into the details of the documentary. I'm going to give kind of a fairly broad synopsis of what we watched. Crew in the room, if you have any thoughts as I get to each point, please interrupt me and give your thoughts. I used RogerEbert.com for my source compiling the synopsis, so a lot of this comes straight from there. 13th begins with an alarming statistic. 1 out of 4 African-American males will serve prison time at one point or another in their lives. The doc begins from there, with a bunch of talking heads filling the frame and providing information. 13th not only interviews liberal scholars and activists for the cause like Angela Davis, Henry Louis Gates, and Van Jones, she also devotes screen time to conservatives such as Newt Gingrich and Grover Norquist. Each interviewee is shot in a location that evokes industrial setting, which visually supports the theme of prison as a factory churning out the free labor and the 13th Amendment supposedly dismantled when it abolished slavery. I will comment on that. I thought the filming of this was really well done. A lot of the people sitting on like radiators in a concrete hallway.
Didn't put that together at all.
Yeah. No, it was, but I guarantee it affected how we felt when we watch it. I know that, just settings, just like sitting down here in this room, if we were in a stark white office with fluorescent lights, it wouldn't be as comfortable as a conversation. Filmmakers know that when they film these things. Let's put people in the right mood when they're watching this.
And there was a talking head that she was sitting sideways in like a little alcove that I think was supposed to look like a little cell. Yes. And when that popped up on the screen, I was like, God, they choose the weirdest backgrounds.
That's
and then
exactly
I was like,
what I said. Why is she sitting like this?
I was like, why is she side? Oh, okay.
I did not put that together until you said that.
Yeah.
I'm just not in that
now you're
mindset.
reflecting.
Nope.
Yeah.
All right, from there, we're told that after the Civil War, the economy for the former Confederate States of America was decimated. Their primary source of income, which was slavery, was no longer up. They were no longer obligated to line Southerners' pockets with their blood, sweat, and tears, unless, of course, they were criminals. Quote, except as punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, reads the loophole in the law. In the first iteration of a, quote, Southern strategy, hundreds of newly emancipated slaves were re-enlisted into free legal servitude courtesy of minor or trumped-up charges. That's exactly what James was just talking about. The duly convicted part, or having been convicted after constitutional due process, may have been questionable, meaning that they may not have gotten a proper trial to get these convictions.
As we definitely saw.
Right. But by no means did it need to be justifiably proven. So my thoughts on this. So this loophole was immediately exploited. You could still be a slave if you were a criminal. That was insane to me. So let's just start calling you a criminal so that we can keep using you as a slave.
Right. And then create the image that Black people are criminals. And Birth of a Nation is something that I learned about in high school as a movie that was heralded as one of the greatest movies of all time. Never seen it, never watched it, hadn't seen clips of it until this documentary. And it was horrifying.
Yep.
And did not know that it was essentially about the rise of the Klan and how they rescued white women from uncontrollable Black men that were compared to animals with uncontrollable urges. It was disgusting. It was defiling. It was just the most horrifying thing you can imagine. And then on top of that, if you know film history, Black people were not allowed to be in the movies. So the Black people were depicted by white men painted in blackface. So horror on top of horror on top of horror. And the presidents at the time had private movie screenings. And of course, the Klan was already around. And the fact that the the Burning Cross was a director's choice. Yes. He's like, oh, this will look great on film. Let's just add that. And
aesthetic effect. And now it's a
life imitating art.
Exactly.
Life imitating art.
So toward the beginning of this, there was a quote that kind of stood out to me. That was something, and I don't remember who said it, but there was something along the lines of, we have to understand that we today, Jeff, Katie, Molly, James, DJ, everybody today have to understand that we are a product of our ancestors' choices. Or, if you're Black, choices that were not given to your ancestors. Which that was an insane thing for me to try to comprehend, I guess. But it's so true. And when I heard that, I recalled several conversations I've either been a part of or been aware of regarding things like, well, it wasn't me who had slaves, or I wasn't a slave, so or that was a long time
not
ago.
personally
So
responsible for it.
So I'm not necessarily but I think that we need to understand that that's the privileges that we have.
And we're still benefiting from the system that was created by those people 200 years ago.
Exactly.
It still exists. Police were created to catch runaway slaves, and then they created the prison system to enslave black people to do their slave labor. And the fact that it still exists means we are benefiting from that system. And if we acknowledge it and we talk about it, we can enact change.
Right.
Yeah. But,
Hypothetically.
yeah, but you can say it still happens today, right? But without the police force, we would have way more chaos still. Even though it happened back then, like I said, that's back then, And I was gonna get on that other subject about blackface and when they was doing it. I thought the thing was funny myself, really. You had a guy dressed up with a perm in his head, running around, and I don't know what he was doing on the back of the mountain, but looking like he didn't even look like he was trying to attack anybody.
Yeah,
I
literally.
didn't know he was trying to play Bigfoot or what was he trying to do, So I'm like, hey, but then if you take a look at the whole thing, it's almost like like a Hitler move, like a Hitler mindset, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Where in order to have the American people act this way, you have to make those people look bad.
Propaganda.
Yeah, propaganda. And that's how they did Hitler. And this is the same movement, same thing. And a lot of us, what would we do? If danger come our way, we need protection. We want protection. So we can just play on that. And that's what they did. They just played on that. And stuff like this happened. Myself personally, I don't hold anything against white people or any color people because we all put our pants on the same way. Mm-hmm. Today we shop at the same stores today. We all have opportunities as everyone has the same opportunities. I lived through a lot of the racisms and everything where people don't want to touch your hand when they hand you money, where you actually ignore you when you want to go into a hotel. And they just we don't have any rooms. And then as soon as you turn around, they say, oh, we got a lot of rooms to someone else that's not the same color. So the stuff still exists, but not to the extent it existed back then.
James, do you think, though, first of all, I'm glad to hear that you feel that way about a lot of that stuff. Something tells me, though, that if some of the people, even in your family or where you grew up, if they were sitting in this room right now, would they feel that same way?
Half my family would.
Not to ask you to talk for the entirety of the black community, but you're the representative in this room.
So by the way, you guys, I am a black guy. Just in case you didn't know it, because it's a mic. I don't only sound cool because I am cool. No, I'm just kidding. But
King James ups our
yeah, King James. Sorry about that. But half my family would feel like, dang, blanked on people. Mm. The other half is the closest part of my family would feel like I feel. They really don't really care a lot about the stuff that happened. But every black person, whether they feel angry or whether they feel like, it's cool like I do, they all are totally aware of their standing in society today.
What do you mean by standing in society?
Like when we go to places, I don't know about other people, but my whole family, if they go to places, they totally look around mentally, not really.
What are they
without
looking
knowing?
for?
They just for that sign that says you don't belong here, or okay, I see it all the time. I work for Walmart. Things that people assume that black people are. It's like when I go talk to somebody, they'll talk to this other guy. He's a white guy. Hey, how you doing? What's going on, John? How the family? Then the same second he sees me, yo, what's up, man? What's happening? I'm like, hold on, wait just a minute. Hold on, what happened? We just switched up like that, So I just get them back and I say, well, nothing, Johnny. We're doing good, And then they just look at me crazy. I got you, that type of thing. So it's fun, but you're always aware. When I go down south, there's places down south where you cannot go.
Sundown towns?
Yeah. Some downtowns where you cannot go. Still
what is
sundown
today. Towns? Tell me about that.
Ooh. Oh. Okay. So
not to get too far off topic.
A couple years ago,
let's do it.
A fabulous show called Lovecraft Country came out. And it was half sci-fi, half 1960s civil rights topic. Anyway, the characters were driving through a sundown town, and they stopped at a diner that was whites only. And they sat down and ordered, and they were not served. But the sheriff came by and said, you better not be here after dark. Sundown towns are where people of color cannot exist after dark. They will be murdered and run out of town.
Right.
And there is a list online called Sundown Towns where you can find the entire country of the United States listed state by state and city by city, where people of color can find places where they are not safe. And it's called sundown towns.
And the people who live in those cities and towns and stuff proudly call
there
them
are billboards
sundown towns. There's billboards all
outside
over.
of some of these sundown towns that'll say, after 6 o'clock, you better not be here.
Yeah.
James, is that something that... So I'm sitting here with my mouth almost on the floor because this is something I had no idea about. But I was born and raised in middle-class Midwest America.
See, that's where it comes.
Is that something that you like know about?
I never knew about it until about maybe 3 years ago, sundown. So, I grew up same way as you, Jeff. But I didn't have no privilege, but, heck, I just run up and down the streets, play football, do like anything else. You don't think about that. But when you leave and go down south and you hear that stuff, like I said, there's places where you cannot go down south.
Yeah.
Do you feel safer in the Midwest than you do in the South?
I feel safer in the South. Really? Yeah, because in the South, you know where you stand. There's no cover up or there's no nothing. They're going to let you know right off, hey, get out of here.
They're more straightforward about hating you.
But
that's horrible. That makes
at least
you
know
feel
where
safer.
you stand and you're safe.
Yeah, I guess because the
you know a
Midwest,
wolf is
they
there,
cover it up, right?
If you know a wolf is there, if you don't see the wolf, you're in more danger when you.
Oh, that's
you know
horrible.
What I mean? So it's like
pretending to be nice isn't good. Covering up racism isn't good. You'd rather they be racist to your face.
Yeah.
Because then at least you know you need to leave the situation.
Right. They can just get out of there. Wow. And you can't really cover up racism anyway, especially if you're always looking for it. You're looking for danger. You see it anyway, regardless. There's little bitty hints. But I don't really, I really don't really care anyway.
All right. So back into the doc. DuVernay examines in each of these Southern strategies that they talk about in the doc, when one method of subservience-based terror falls out of favor, another takes its place. The list feels endless and includes lynching, Jim Crow, Nixon's presidential campaign, Reagan's war on drugs, Clinton's 3 strikes and mandatory sentencing laws, which he said was a mistake. Like, okay, thanks for
apologizing,
double
brother.
down and then regret it.
And then the current cash for prisoners model that generates millions for private bail and
Private
incarceration
prisons are
firms.
so bad.
Yep.
I did not know private prisons were a thing. And maybe that's just my age and lack of experience in the world, but
I think until someone tells you that they're bad, you wouldn't know.
Oh my God.
I mean, who's going to go
so
on the internet and be like, what is a private prison?
Right.
Right.
There was one kind of specific quote, and the guy's name was John Ehrlichman. He was one of Nixon's, what was it?
Advisors.
He was Nixon's advisor, yeah. And he gave a testimony regarding his time under the administration. His quote was, Nixon's war was against the left and blacks. So we associated hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and we put it all over the evening news. We disrupted those communities. We knew we were lying. Barf, man. Like, to hear that, like, and if I don't know if I'm remembering this right, but was it just a written quote, or did we actually hear him say that?
We heard him say it, and we saw it on the screen.
Yeah.
Right.
It was like a transcripted thing of us,
To hear that come out of the mouth of somebody who was in the administration, like,
trusted as a government leader.
right.
Like,
And then we got to remember that the founding fathers had slaves.
yeah.
Everybody except Alexander Hamilton. So they weren't great.
No. And to kind of speak to that, when I watch this doc and I see the clips of an innocent guy just getting shoved by a mob of people as he's walking down the street and just pushing him.
And he doesn't push back. He
Right.
doesn't fight because he
just
knows
keeps
what'll
walking.
happen.
Oh, as soon as he fought back, he would be
Then it's his
Destroyed.
fault.
Murdered.
It's his
Done,
fault.
dragged through the streets.
Yeah, you saw how they did it both ways, though. How they bring it from the past and then they bring it in the present. I'm like, wow.
The
it's just
poor people
same.
at the Trump rallies, I was so afraid for them. I
Right.
thought for sure they were going to get murdered because they said they were going to kill them.
They were just standing. That's
Right.
the thing is like,
And in this part of the doc too, they talked about how blacks moving out of the South wasn't just because hey,
Great
now we're
Migration.
slaves, so or now we're not slaves and we're free. We're
Trying to
we're
live.
leaving because we're
getting
being
murdered.
terrorized.
yeah, they had to.
It was
They were
insane.
fleeing.
2023, Jeff says, when I watch that, I go, you know, the first thing that comes into my head is like, if I was there, I'd want to stand in front of those people and I'd want to, but the realism kicks in and goes,
Your family's going to be murdered.
not only that, but what we're sitting here talking about my privilege as a white man in the Midwest and the things that I know and don't know. And because of the things that were fed to me my whole life as I'm growing up. Back then, with even less access to true information about what's going on without the internet and without all those things, would would Jeff, if he was born back then, would he have felt the same way that all those assholes that were pushing the guy down the street does?
Right.
It literally makes my stomach feel like I'm gonna throw up.
Yeah.
Thinking like I could very easily
Right.
have been,
If you were the average middle
White
class
guy.
white American
Because all of them were
man,
right there doing
you
that.
would have been pushing him
Right.
too. And that's horrible.
and I don't like to think that. I of course want to think I would have been the guy to stand there
Right.
because now I would.
right.
But I think you can think back to your parents and your parents' parents and how they were raised
Right.
and think, were my grandparents racist?
Probably.
Were my
Oh,
parents
for
racist?
sure.
All of our grandparents.
Okay.
racist.
Well,
Mine were.
because this used to keep me up
still
at
are.
night.
I don't talk to them because they still are.
So my grandma lived in a really white neighborhood, and her idea of a good time was having me bring my Cabbage Patch doll, which was a little black baby in a diaper, and I would hide my Smarties in it because the diaper was sewed to her legs so I could take my candy with me. And my grandma would have me bring my Cabbage Patch doll, and she would go to the rich side of town and have me in the cart with her at the grocery store, and the ladies' heads would pop off when she'd push me through with my black Cabbage Patch doll. And that was her idea of a good time. So
I can see why you turned out the way that you did.
so yeah, we've always been super outspoken. So I'd like to like cross my fingers and hope to God that back then I would have done something. But like you said, there's just, that's the way it was. They had to bring in the National Guard to put Ruby Bridges in an elementary school where she went to class alone for like a year before there were other students.
Right. And that's crazy today because if you take a look at today, how I think that's one of the worst things that ever happened to black people is the fact that they were actually given what they were screaming for. Because now that they don't have a purpose, it's like, we don't want to go to school anymore. We don't want to do nothing. But all those people that crossed the line, that had to fight, that got beat, and all this stuff for you to have opportunity. And when I say you, I see for blacks is to have opportunity to go to school. Now you don't want to do it. You know, that's some crazy thinking right there. You know what? You know, so
What do you think is the cause?
the cause is, like I said, there's no what I say, freedom. There's no reasoning. There's no reasoning given now, or no purpose. That's what I say. Before,
They were
purpose. You
fighting
know,
for a
like when you're a
purpose.
kid, you tell a kid, don't do that. The first thing they're gonna do is they're gonna try to do that.
Yeah.
That's still
know,
my problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the same way, if you take away and just give it to them, you don't got a reason anymore now.
The last item the doc reported on in the Southern Strategy, which was the current cash for prisoners model that generates millions for private bail and incarceration firms. That's a major part of the discussion in 13th, with an on-screen graphic that's keeping a tally of the number of prisoners in the system as the years pass. Starting in the 1940s, the curve of prisoners count graph begins rising slowly, though steeply. A meteoric rise began during the civil rights movement and continued into the current day, which was 2016. So that it did leave off a little bit before some of the more current things that went on. As the statistic rises, so does the level of decimation of families of color. The stronger the protest for rights, the harder the system fights back against it with means of incarceration. Profit becomes the major byproduct of this cycle, with an organization called ALEC, the American Legislative... She wrote it on her notepad.
Coloring it.
The American Legislative Exchange Council, which provides a scary, sinister influence on building laws that make its corporate members richer. We were damn near committing genocide of entire communities during my lifetime. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea about that.
Same here.
Well, if you look at the news from then, they even said in the show, they were like, we were purposely putting young black men on the screen being handcuffed, even on the show Cops, to try and make people afraid of black people during the crack epidemic.
And it worked.
It definitely did.
I'm scared of James every single day.
Yeah, James.
And I'm almost scared. No, I'm not scared of myself. But yeah, that's what I was just saying. You know, if you want something to work, you got to paint the picture bad. Mm-hmm. You know, the darker the picture, the scarier it is.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So you're gonna want to get away from that.
Yep.
And that's just like you said, it is today. So you know, what can you say?
Well, I think that also kind of ties back to what you were saying earlier about kids not wanting to go to school and stuff, is because now they know that they're going to be painted as criminals and thieves and the things that they are, and that there's always going to be a predisposition of them being worse. And so they're maybe not motivated to go to school and everything, especially in like have those good opportunities and like nicer schools and that kind of thing, because the kids might pick on them, or they're going to be bullied or whatever, or they're going to be thought of as what they're not. And so they're just like, well, why would I do that? So I might as well just go do whatever I want to do. I don't want to go to school. Why would I? Right.
And so for some reason that skipped. In my time, it kind of skipped. I didn't have that problem. But today, I could see that happening, you know, because there's a lot of leaders today that even believe the mess that were handed to them, and they went along with that. You know, the war on drugs, they went along with that just because, like I said, Nancy said no to drugs. Let's follow that, you know, like whatever. There ain't no drugs in the projects. You know, I lived in the projects. And we were playing football, basketball. We got families, everybody having fun. Wasn't no drugs in there. I don't know what was going on here, you know.
But if they say there was, then all of a sudden
there is.
Oh, there's fear.
Right. And then you play movies like Colors. You play it on that day, put it in the black neighborhoods. People like to imitate TV sometimes.
Yeah.
They do.
And that's
what media is.
Right. Imitation, something, whatever people try to do. So, but anyway, I'm done.
You don't have to be done.
One thing that
never be done, James.
About the ALEC piece, I mean, that's probably a topic in and of itself.
I can't believe they gave a spokesperson and he still sounded like an idiot.
Oh, for sure.
Like,
but
you mind if I make money? No, sucker.
You know you're full of it.
right.
Yeah.
To me, ALEC was the big kind of conspiracy, capital T, they, that we talk about when we say, you know, they don't want us to succeed. They don't want black people to be like, that's they.
The fact that they're writing legislation and that the legislative bodies are too stupid to change the font or even change the name at the top of the bill.
Fill in the blank.
Right.
Your state's
Insert
name
your
here.
state.
Right.
The fact that they're not even smart enough to do that just proves that they're not even writing their own bills. This company is literally writing them for them.
It's insane.
And controlling these bills in Congress. And
at the
it's
same
just
time, fat in
insane.
your
The
pockets.
NRA, it still supports them. That's the name I saw at the end. As the names were falling off, Walmart backed off, State Farm left. NRA,
I know
still
when,
there, but
when
we know
State
the
Farm
NRA
was
is
still up
evil.
on the screen, I was like, God damn, I'm gonna have to switch insurance and company.
Yep.
All right. So several times throughout 13th, there was a shot cut to the word criminal, which stands alone against the black background and is centered on the screen very largely. It serves as a reminder that far too often people of color are seen as simply that, regardless of who they are. Starting with D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation, DuVernay traces the myth of the scary black felon with supernatural levels of strength and deviant sexual potency, a myth designed to terrify the majority into believing that only white people were truly human and deserving of proper treatment. This dehumanization allowed for the acceptance of laws and ideas that had more than a hint of bias. We see higher sentences given for crack versus cocaine, possession, and plea bargains accepted by innocent people too terrified to go to trial. We also learn that a troubling percentage of people remain in jail because they're too poor to post their own bail. And regardless of your color, if you're a felon, you can no longer vote to change the laws that have unfairly prosecuted you in the first place.
Or have access to any kind of welfare after you get out. How are you supposed to get a job?
Aid, yeah.
You lose a primary right that all Americans have, except for felons, right?
Right.
Okay, I had never seen or even... I mean, I know I've heard of Birth of a Nation before watching this doc, but I'd never seen any actual footage from it. And I know we talked about it a little bit, but man, was that difficult. I know, James, you said you thought it was funny.
Yeah, I still think it's funny.
Maybe it's just white guilt seeping in.
It is white guilt for sure.
But seeing that and going,
We're terrible.
what?
This is horrible.
Right, but what would you
okay?
think if somebody wouldn't have said that, though? What if you just saw it as just a black and white film? And no one said that this was
I can't
what it
say
was.
that I would see that and never thought it was funny
'Cause
in my life.
I didn't think the guy was going after. Like I said, I didn't know what the heck he was doing with his
So
painted
you're just
face
judging
and
the
this,
poor acting
this
then.
real super bad. She jumped off of a cliff. It didn't like she was screaming loud enough for me, you know. She just jumped over. What, you know what I mean? With a perm in your hair, too? Come on now.
But with
James
that,
is judging the acting and the haircut.
Poor.
with that having been so influential on the political climate
And the American public.
and the resurgence of the Klan. I mean,
There's no other way to look at it.
Yeah, that's a huge demonstration of the type of power that media has.
Right.
I mean, if that's not the ultimate example, I don't know what is.
Right. My thing about, excuse me, Jay, I'm sorry. But my thing about that part, when I heard that little piece, that caught me right there when they said the Klan. And that means that the Klan is actually embedded in the government.
Oh,
you know?
for sure.
Absolutely.
And there you can see right there along, I could see, was it Alex? I could see them all being Klan men. You know, I hate to say it like that. The association.
Oh, Alec, yeah.
Alec.
Oh, for
Alec,
sure.
yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm gonna top words up too. Also, just let y'all know. But Alex, yeah, you know, you could see that being like Klan members.
The Klan just got rid of the pointy hoods and put on suits
Right.
and ties, basically.
Suits and ties.
Exactly.
And it's concerning
They had to
because
blend in.
it's concerning because you got that guy doing the mind frame like that, and those people could also become doctors and scientists and everything else, and they
Racist
can do
people are everywhere.
good. Yeah, they're everywhere. And not only white people racist, there's black racist people too. It's interesting though to know that racism can go so high and almost be invisible, hidden behind laws and everything else. You know, it's just wild if you think about that part.
It's
now.
ingrained
Well, they use
into
words
our
like
laws.
urban
Yeah, right.
and troublemakers. They just use all these other terms, and what they're trying to say is black.
Right. Well, black
and
are is not only black people,
People of color.
people of
Right.
color.
And they're using
And
the
then-
word criminal interchangeably
Right.
with people of color.
But this is happening in America, though.
Right.
But we gotta remember, slavery been throughout the whole world forever.
Yeah.
All over the world.
Yep.
You know, even the Native Americans had slaves, kind of like, but they would integrate them into their families. You know,
God, you could make a whole
And a lot-
documentary about, or you can make a whole podcast just talking about documentaries about Native Americans.
right? And not only that, people may think that black people were stolen from the land, but black people were traded from other blacks, given to America as slaves also. So, you know, that's just how it was, you know.
All right, 13th covers a lot of ground as it works its way to the current days of Black Lives Matter and the terrifying videos of the endless list of African Americans being shot by police or folks who supposedly, quote, stood their ground. On her journey to this point, DuVernay doesn't let either political party off the hook, nor does she ignore the fact that many people of color brought into the, quote, law and order philosophies that led to the current situation. We see clips of Hillary Clinton talking about super predators and Donald Trump's full-page ad advocating the death penalty for the Central Park Five, who, as a reminder, were all innocent. And we will be discussing the Central Park Five in a documentary episode coming up in a few weeks. So check that one out. We also see people like African-American Congressman Charlie Rangel, who originally was on board with the tough on crime laws President Clinton signed into law. By the time we get to the montage of the deaths of Philando Castile, Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, and others, Trayvon Martin, and others, not to mention the huge screen covering graphic of names of African Americans shot by law enforcement, 13th has already proven its thesis on how such events can not only occur, but can also seem sadly like business as usual. It's a devastating finale to the film, one that follows an on-screen discussion about whether or not the destruction of black bodies should be run ad nauseum on cable news programs. DuVernay opts to show the footage, with an on-screen disclaimer that it's being shown with permission by the families of the victims, something she did not have to seek, but did so out of respect. Between the lines, 13th boldly asks the question if African Americans were actually ever truly free in this country. People of color may be freer, as this generation has it a lot easier than their ancestors who were enslaved. But the question of being completely free, or as completely free as their white compatriots, hangs in the air. If not, will the day come when all things will be equal? The final takeaway of 13th is that change must not come from politicians, but from the hearts and minds of the American people. Despite the heavy subject matter, DuVernay ends the film with joyful scenes of children and adults of color enjoying themselves in a variety of activities. It reminds us, as she said in her Q&A with the New York Film Festival director Kent Jones, that black trauma is not our entire lives. There's also black joy. That inspiring message and all the important educational information provided by this excellent documentary make 13th a must-see. Okay. Heavy hitting. So toward the end of the doc, when they put the old civil rights movement footage over audio from Donald Trump,
that I put that down as my standout moment.
That was crazy.
That was insane to see.
That was angering. That was heart-wrenching. I mean, I can't help but feel like we kind of went a little bit backwards in time. And I know that's exactly a lot of what was going on in 2016. And
I think with this renaissance of Trump, we have found that our country is much more openly racist than we realized. And that is a terrible thing. But I also like knowing who they are.
Right. Like I said, down south, they let you know who they are. And it's good to know that.
But there's so many people here, too. There's so many people, so many more than I realized. There's so many friends and family that we've lost, that we've cut off due to their horrible beliefs. Just horrible.
I think it's important to point out that the point of our podcast is to talk about these documentaries. And some of them are going to be harder to swallow and harder to process, and maybe a little harder to talk about. Thankfully, this wasn't hard to talk about because I know we all love and respect each other. But toward the end of this documentary, it kind of the only thing that I could really, I guess the only word that I could think of was confusion, I guess, about what could possibly be done about stuff like this. About halfway through the documentary, I stopped taking notes and I turned the thing off. I had to come back to it. As we kind of talked about before, my jaw was almost on the floor, during the majority of this, because quite simply, there's just things that I didn't know, which is the joy of documentaries, because you learn things that you didn't know.
Right.
So I would be the first to say that privilege has its benefits because ignorance is bliss in a lot of ways. Well, I can say that this is not something that is shown to white boys in Central America. Mm-mm. I mean, DJ can attest to that. We went through the same school systems. We went through, the same high schools. DJ, you watched this documentary. Did any of this? I mean, we got told that in the Civil War, slavery ended, and that was it. You don't learn any of this.
Right. You learn about Jim Crow laws, and then they say, oh, well, then they took Jim Crow laws away. And now some people are just mean, but that's it.
Juneteenth is a federal holiday. I didn't know what Juneteenth was until it was a federal holiday. We definitely didn't talk about it in school.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I may sound contradictory, but I kind of like the Jim Crow law. I know I sound
contradictory. A black man just said he liked Jim Crow laws.
Yeah, I didn't like the treatment of Jim Crow law. I didn't like how they were so
he just wants his own
dangerous to other
space.
people. But to have that separation, and maybe that was a good thing. Like I said,
separation of what?
Separating to let you know now you got your own thing. You can do your own thing. Like whatever you guys do. If I know everybody in this room, when they want to do their own thing, they want to do their own thing, and it makes them feel good. But nobody's forcing you to do your own thing. When they forcing you to do your own thing, then it's not your own thing again. Then it's somebody else. That's what I said. Jim Crow law, I kind of like it because they were doing their own thing. But when they was forced to do it, it's not a good thing.
Do you think if they hadn't forced it, that we would have naturally gotten to that point?
To Jim Crow laws?
No, to integration.
Yeah. It was inevitable. I mean, you got too many black
James.
people. You got too many black people knowing too much. Because the more you gain knowledge, the more understanding you gain, and everybody knows, what's that saying? Knowledge is power. The more you understand, there's not going to be people sitting around, and rather than have a mass fight going on, like a whole bunch of black people go, oh, you can't let us read no more. We're going to get you now. Shut up. Get that stuff out of here. As we grow older, as we go smarter, wiser, we're going to either learn to work together as one, or we're going to learn to divide the country, and then someone else will be taking over. This might be the new Russia. So what do you want to do?
Do you think if the civil rights protests hadn't happened in the 60s, that we would have had integration in schools and public places?
It took a little bit longer, but yes.
I really enjoy your optimism, James. You are one of a kind, and I really appreciate that about you.
I'm just saying.
So one of the last things it's my job as the host to bring us back on the topic.
Okay, thank you.
Good radio voice.
Mm-hmm.
One of the last things that the gentleman's name was Brian Stevenson. He was one of the talking heads from the documentary. One of the last things that he said in the doc was that people often ask, how did people put up with the lynchings and the segregation and all of that? And that sort of goes back to what I was speaking about earlier. And his point was that we as a people are still tolerating this type of behavior. But the question kind of remains in my head, and this is rhetorical. I'm not looking for an answer here. It's just the things that I have to ruminate on and kind of question in everything is, how do we support? How do we become allies? How do we not sit by and be tolerant of things that are going around us? Is it voting? Because that has mixed reviews on how much good that does. Mm-hmm.
Especially if you've arrested
right.
90% of one group.
Is it protesting? Is it
then
launching
we see where that
Molotov
gets
cocktails into the streets? What kind of, is it looting businesses? Is that how we show support? Again, that's an open-ended question. I'm not asking for anyone to give, me an answer on that, because that's something that we all individually have to reflect on. But that's kind of what went through my head toward the end of that.
I think the civil rights movement was unique in that, like the Vietnam War, it was on television. And so for the first time, people around the country were seeing what was happening. Like Selma, they saw Black families, Black people being destroyed by police, men, women, and children. And that really activated people to call LBJ and write the Civil Rights Act in 1967. And I think when we watched in 2020 with George Floyd and those protests, it got more and more people motivated, and now we have social media. But then that's the double-edged sword is fake news, which has been spread by these media giants since they don't always take it down right away. But what I think was different this time is that the media was being attacked by the police, which was new, I think. We saw news reporters from NBC, ABC, CBS getting arrested by the police while they were reporting. And there's nothing you can do for a couple hours at least. They're just going to handcuff you, put you in a truck, take you to the tank and leave you there. And you just got to wait for somebody to come get you. You could say, you know, I've got a press badge, I've got everything. They're still going to handcuff you and take you. And so I think we all became a little more aware of the police state, but I don't know where to go from there.
Right. Okay, so this is the part of our show where we call the round table, where we're going to go around and talk about a standout moment that each of us kind of decided on. Sort of what do you feel stood out to you most, whether it's a scene, a plot point, a production trait, anything like that that stood out to you, and there we'll talk about it just a little bit. Katie, since this was your pick, let's start with you, if you're okay with that. What was your standout moment?
I think the standout moment for me was probably ALEC, the American Legislative Executive, whatever that stood for. Just the fact that they were creating legislation themselves. I mean, we all know PACs and super PACs are out there creating...
American Legislative Exchange Council.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We all know that these groups are out there, lobbyists are out there talking to lawmakers and creating these things. But to have a group that is a cross between private organizations and lawmakers working together, which should be illegal, writing these bills and then having them copy paste them into law, that's horrifying. I think
Scary.
we all have a personal responsibility to be aware of politics, and I think plenty of us like to say, "Oh, I'm not involved in politics." But we're talking about people's lives. You need to be aware of what's happening to other people, and that's just part of privilege, is saying, "Well, it doesn't affect me, so I don't have to worry about it." And especially with this documentary, we realize that even on a bigger scale, that there are people that we vote into office, whether or not we're participating, that may be writing these bills with these private organizations to have for-profit prisons that are essentially putting people into slavery, that if they ever make it out, are just going to end up right back in because they have no assistance to get out of this cycle. It was horrifying.
Yeah. Thanks, Katie.
You're welcome.
Malie.
What stood out to me the most, I guess, and we already kind of talked about it, was when they were showing Trump's verbiage being very similar, if not the exact same as Nixon's. And it just felt like we just drew back 50 years. Like it was just a complete erasure of all of the history and everything that we've gone through to get to the point that we have now, and kind of what James was talking about earlier, where a lot of the horrible things that have happened in the past are far in the past because of media, because of laws that have been put in place. But obviously a lot of those repercussions still get carried. And so to have someone in the highest, not even one of the highest, the highest position of leadership possible, be saying the same things that someone 50 years ago who was blatantly racist, and be saying the same things and encouraging his followers to do those things, was horrible. Like it was just, it stood out to me the most because I was repulsed. Like I was nauseous. And since we've kind of talked about that more, another thing that really stood out to me was, I actually watched this with a friend of mine who's Hispanic, and he can't vote. He doesn't have the ability to vote in this country. And when they were talking about incarceration being similar to with the immigration, and families immigrating into the country and being put into prisons and that kind of thing, and then them being called like camps and that kind of thing. He was like, I just really wish that my vote mattered, because I am contributing every single day into this country, and I can't do anything about the way that my people are being treated, by anybody else in this world is being treated. And I don't matter to this country, even though I'm working my ass off every single day doing those things. And they inserted footage of families like laying on the ground dirty, like trying to get into a place where they can have a better life. And they just don't count. They don't matter to anybody in the government, or like they're so far from the media too that it's so hard to watch, because like we don't see that every day. Like ignorance truly is a privilege. Like if you have the privilege of not having a stance on politics, or not being able to, if you can look away from the media and look away from the politics of things, like that in and of itself is a privilege, because they can't do that. Like they're stuck in those situations that are exactly like prisons, and they're just they're in concentration camps. Like it's horrible. So those are the two things that stood out to me the most, besides everything else that we talked about. But this documentary is so well done that everything was just like, it was like punch after punch after punch.
It really was.
I had to pause multiple times because I just needed to take a moment and like
walk around my living room for a while.
I needed to sit and process my emotions, because I was just I was like repulsed. Oh God. But they did such a good job. So
They did a good job.
King James, on to you, buddy.
Well, I kind of said everything throughout the first ones, but thing that stood out to me was like when they, how the government can just paint something to be so horrible and it not be that exactly at all, How they came in and just shot the Black Panther guy in his bed, shot everybody and all that. And how they just killed the whole people. But when they brung the guy out on the stretcher, it was just like the 19 murder movie with hanging blacks. They were smiling like it was like a lynch, but they was bringing it. This was later. Yeah. And they had that same goofy, look at me look on their face. Look what I done. And you didn't do anything. You went to serve a warrant, but instead of serving a warrant, you just went and shot some sleeping guy. At least let them be out there trying to be in the act of doing something. But to go in there and just kill him at night and to come out all happy.
With his pregnant wife in bed with him.
Right, that was crazy to me.
It was like a montage of the most horrible pictures and stories you've ever seen in your life. It was, oh, God.
Yep. And the word redesign. That stood out too. How did this redesign slavery into the law and make it legal? I thought that was something too. That's crazy. So that was my takes on those.
Thanks, man.
Yep.
So for me, a standout moment, can we just say the whole thing?
Yes, seriously.
But truthfully, I think the piece that stood out the most was kind of how the very first mention and my first realization of how immediate the turn from involuntary servitude to the same exact thing called something different. It was just that realization.
Right.
I mean, I know I hit the back button on my little Uber. Not Uber. What the fuck, Jeff?
Roku?
Roku. Thank you. My Roku. The back button on my Uber remote. Yeah. How immediate it was.
That's redesigned.
Redesigned. It's the same thing. It's all probably owned by Walmart, but
True.
Walmart or Disney,
Amazon.
One thing after another. Just the veiled. It's still servitude.
Right.
And it's still a way to make money off of a group of people who have built our country and solidified an economy of a certain part of the country, and now we're still doing it. I know we're talking in circles, but that was my standout moment, was just that realization for me in that. And can we talk about how damn good the music was in
Oh,
that.
so good.
We
The
didn't mention
lyrics
that
from
the
those rap
lyric.
songs that were on the screen were
Nina
phenomenal.
Simone, the first song that they played of hers is so good.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, chills. Anyway, all right.
It was so perfect, too.
Did they write it specifically for this? Do you know?
No.
One of the songs was nominated for a Grammy, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
I think that was I had a note in there somewhere, but
Yeah,
it in the
one
show
of them
notes.
was, but
I'll put it in the show notes.
yeah. But I think most
it in
of
the
them
show
were existing songs,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Did we feel like any stones were left unturned? Did we feel like the documentary didn't talk about something that they should have? And this can be cut out if we don't come up with anything here, but is there anything that we felt that wasn't talked about that we felt should have been?
I think they talked about the right to vote for Black people, but I think Black women got the vote after that.
Is that true? Do we know that? Not that we need to.
I don't know
We're
that.
not
That wasn't part of
investigative
the
journalists, but
I mean, I may be
No.
a black man, but you know, hey, I don't know everything. You know? That's what I'm saying. You know. But the thing is, women do have the rights to vote today,
Yeah.
and that's the most important thing.
Well,
It's a little late, though.
what me and Katie were talking about
We
on
can
the way.
take that back, though. You know. No, I'm just kidding. You can't
Coming
do
for you, King James. Gonna
so
dethrone
everyone,
you.
this is an audio medium, but everyone, Katie just flipped off James as hard as she could.
It's hard. Yeah, it was very hard.
And I didn't see it, of course. You know.
I'll just make it. Here we
All
go.
right, Katie, if you find that chime in.
Did they give us any call to action, or like was
No.
there any like
That
here's
was the
what we could do at the
No.
end?
Yeah,
that was
that was my thing right there.
Yeah, that was the
That's
piece
what
I was
put
talking
down.
about. The guy, what's his name? Brian Stevenson said this stuff is still being tolerated, and that was my whole question. Then
And then what?
how do we
Right.
support? What can we do?
My thing is educating people, just educating them, making it, you know, taking away this mental inhumanity thing for this one race or one race of color, and just try to make everything as an equal. That's what this Black Lives Matter thing. I'm not down with Black Lives Matters, but the whole thing is treat everyone as human beings.
All right, finally, we've come to the part of our show where we need to rate the documentary with an official Talkumentary rating. Each crew member scores the documentary on a scale of 1 to 10 items, with 1 being an absolute piece of garbage and 10 being on par with the best documentaries you've ever seen in your whole life. The items used in scoring changes every week, depending on the content of the documentary. And before the show, we decided that we were going to use prison bars for our item this week. So this week, prison bars as a rating item. Let's start with James. James, how many prison bars do you give 13th?
I gave them 8.
8 prison bars.
8 prison bars.
Molly, prison bars.
9.
9 prison bars.
9 prison bars for Katie.
Katie gives it 9, and I gave an 8 as well, making the official documentary rating 8.5 prison bars. Thank you, guys, for being a part of the inaugural episode of Talkumentary.
Pleasure.
You're so welcome.
You're so welcome.
I like all you guys.
It's almost like we're all friends or something.
Just let everybody know I like myself. But I
all
do
like
you
James, and
guys
James
also,
doesn't like
you know.
any of us.
We're
You're all
just so
wonderful
glad
people,
James
you know.
is here to bring his royalty down to
King
us.
James.
Right.
Well, you know.
You've been gracing us with your presence.
Oh,
Somebody
thank you
gotta
so
do it,
much.
You know. This is America, baby.
Again, thanks everyone for talking about this incredible documentary with me and with us. For next week, our crew member Bryce has chosen the doc Class Action Park. So we're going to lighten things up just a little bit from today's episode.
Just a titch.
And we're going to watch a 90-minute wild ride about the now defunct amusement park called Action Park that was in New Jersey that became infamous for its poor safety record. Have anyone on this couch watched Action Park?
Yes.
Heck
Yes.
yeah.
Heck yes.
Without giving any
Great
spoilers for next week, what do you think?
Oh God, it's so good.
It's a wild ride, man.
It is a wild, literally, metaphorically, everything about it. was a
James, have
wild
you
ride.
seen Action Park
Nope,
yet?
but I'm
Oh,
going to
James,
watch it
you
now.
should.
That's for
All
sure.
right.
I might
Everyone,
have to have a couple of beers. I'll watch it too.
I think you
Yeah.
probably should. That's the beer drinking episode. I don't drink beer, disclaimer. But
Disclaimer.
everyone who's listening, go out and check out the documentary Class Action Park before next week's episode. It can be streamed on HBO Max. For next week's episode, Katie's going to be joining us once again. Bryce and Matt, who you've yet to meet, will be joining us. And DJ, as always, will be by my side, holding my hand.
Braiding your hair.
Yeah, braiding my hair and whispering in my ear.
Sweet nothings.
We're
Sweet
going to watch
nothings
the
interior.
documentary and
We're
talk
not
about it.
going at that again. You know what I'm saying?
So, on behalf of DJ, Katie, Molly, James, and the entire Talkumentary family, I am your host, Jeff Kolaski, and I want to thank you all for listening. I hope you keep your minds open and be kind to each other. Good. Peace.